Hello, I am Spencer. The year I was born on the Atkinson Plantation in what they call the Middleton District 606. It's called Tolliver County. I was just 3 years old. Part of the plantation was in Tolliver County. Another portion remained in Greenville County. I am the fifth child of Priscilla. There was Sarah, Margaret, Melinda, and Jared before me. Before long, I was joined by Emily, Henry, and Harriet. My mother, Priscilla, was one of 293 slaves living in the district, and there were only 54 white males over the age of 18 in the whole community. The plantation was 1,500 acres, had its own cotton gin, threshing floor, cutting machines, and livestock was horses, cows, hogs, and sheep. Atkinson has 36 slaves and was the largest of the plantation. His married daughter, Elizabeth, who was married to John Battle, had 25 slaves. And the second daughter, Kathleen, who was married to Dr. Rogers Dickerson, had 14 slaves. Dr. R.Q. Dickerson, Catherine's husband, was one of the trustees of the Crawfordsville Academy in 1826. And we heard a lot about the importance of getting education. But in the 1829, Georgia prohibited education of slaves. The slave owner, Amistad Atkinson, would die in 1832. His son and her died the year before leaving his widow to run the plantation. Their daughter Elizabeth would die in 1833, and her husband would move back to North Carolina. Times were hard for the plantation, but by the grace of God, we preserved.
I am Mary. Spencer and I married in the 1840s, and our twins, Henry and Martha, were born in 1848. Most everything we ate or wore was made or grown on the plantation. Life was hard as we worked from sun up to sundown to care for our family, but we were in love and hopeful for the future. In 1858, Sarah, who was called Sally, was born. Then John, which we called Jack, in 1853. Jacob came along in 1855, and Spencer, whom everyone called Freeman, was born in 1858. Some years later, Spencer Sr. introduced Peter in 1866, and the family was complete. There were many families, and we worked together, planting, harvesting, making clothes, shoes, and caring for the livestock.
Our father Jack bought his freedom July 27, 1852, and took the surname of the woman who encouraged him to be free, Nancy Grant. We heard of the Underground Railroad and Nate Turner leading a revolt in Virginia. There were states being admitted to the Union that were free slave states, and some of the slaves began to dream of their own freedom. The year after President Abraham Lincoln is elected president, 1861, the war began. Our friends and Pastor Derek Morden's brother, Charles and Sam, ran off to join Sherman's army. In the times like we knew, that only the Lord knew that we was going to happen, and we put our trust in him.
We were free, but what did that mean to us? We began to think of a new name. We no longer wanted to keep the slave name of Atkinson, but we weren't sure what to call us. When the census lady came in 1870, we gave her the name Atkins, but shortly after that, we changed the name to Turner, and that felt right. Widow Atkinson died in 1872, and her body was taken to North Carolina. Dr. and Catherine Dickinson stayed around for a while, but soon the white people began to move away from this place, leaving us to farm and do as we pleased. Our little prayer group, which began in the home, had grown bigger after the war, and we needed a larger place to worship. The Roberts boys, Hampton, Ebenezer, Jabez, Floyd, Demos, Joseph, and Alexander, gave to the deacons of the church, Lewis Mitchell, Steve Pellers, Henry Stevens, George Peake, Hamp Roberts, and Wiley Beasley about 1870. The original deed was destroyed when the Pastor Derry Murden home caught fire. Spencer passed away before the new church was built, but in 1890, Derry Murden, Hampton Roberts, and Jack Turner purchased 3 acres of land from L.O. Sanders for the church, and we would build a fine new building to praise God. In 1908, I was called home to be with my Savior, and the children were left to carry on the Turner's name.
I am Mary Turner. By 1870, I am Martha Turner, sorry. By 1870, I had married Sam Evans, and we had 3 children, Ophelia, John West, and Edward. I would birth 19 children in all, but in 1910, only 14 were alive. My other children were Quintus Q, Priscilla, Phyllis, Leah, Mary Jane, Nola, twins Tryphosa, Tryphinia, Sam, Raina, Ira, Bertha, Europe, and Jolie. I was there when Miles Hackney won first place in the contest conducted by the 3 Acre Cotton Club. He produced 5,500 pounds of seed cotton on 3.0 acres.
I am Henry Turner. I was glad when the Roberts, Hampton, and wife Mildred came to town, because that is when I met and fell in love with Katie Roberts. I asked her to marry me, and we were wed on September 18th, 1872. Katie birthed 13 children, but by 1910, only 11 survived. My surviving children are Jack, Floyd, James Jenkins, Jink, Robert, Joseph, William Spencer, Hattie, Bishop, Daisy, Mildred, and Mary. I was one of the pastors of Springfield Baptist Church and lived to see it expand and grow.
Hi, I'm Sarah. Most people do not know my real name, as everyone calls me Sally, but my parents named me Sarah. The Roberts family also brought my future partner, and we had 3 beautiful daughters, Sally, Martha, Mary, Millie, Ann, but they were raised by their grandparents, Spence and Mary, as I was departed this life shortly after they were born.
I am John Turner. Like my sister Sarah, I went by my nickname and was always called Jack. I even married my wife Selena Gaines with the name Jack. I was a trustee for the church when they purchased the 3 acres from Ella Sanders. Selena not only had 1 child, but we were blessed with many friends and family members. Our son is Clark Jr. Turner.
I am Jacob. Most people call me Jack, but everybody knows my name. I married Mariah Stewart, and we have 8 living children, even though Mahalia gave birth to 9. Early birth was common in our time because we didn't have the medicine that we have today. Our children are John G., Lavinia, Asita, Victor, Celestis, Harrison, Gertrude, and Hattie Bell.
I am Melinda. I married John Usry and we moved from the Springfield area to be near his family. I gave birth to 19 children. They are Spencer, Rachel, John Henry, Jane, Eliza, Sam, Rebecca, Marion, Mary, Frank, Martha, Cornelia, Pearlie, Cody, Joy, Jake, Lindy, Dave, and Jack. I lived until 1950 and can proudly say that I was the oldest living child of Spencer and Mary. Most of my life was spent with my children and grandchildren. Interesting, fun things happen in Springfield community. I love my family. I often tell my grandchildren about my life growing up. I was here when the railroad came. I lived it to see the new log cabin school in Springfield and to hear about birth and death. November 11, 1938, Springfield had the community fair. April 10, 1942, the trustee, patron, teachers, and friends of the Springfield community witnessed the burning of the mortgage on the Springfield High School.
I am Spencer Jr. I am the one they call free man. I guess you can say I was the worldly one. My first child, Jimmy, was born in 1881. His mother, Mary Young, later married Mitchell Chapman, and his sister Fanny married Luss Turner. I later married Ella Hurd, January 4th, 1883, and she birthed 9 children, but only 8 survived. Sonomia, Frank, Paul, William, Luther, Luella, General Lee, and Clark. Ella died shortly after Clark was born, and I married Lula Berry, November 17th, 1905. We had Cassie Camellia, Ophelia, and Henry Lincoln. We owned a general store and several gardens. My family and I would remain in this area and continue to plant and farm.
I am Reverend Peter Turner. I became pastor of several churches. My first wife, Ella Caffin, and I divorced, and I married Evan Harrell. We did not have any children, but adopted Guy Frank as our own. I developed heart disease while visiting Hot Springs, Arkansas. I died in the Pythian Hotel. My body was sent home, and I was buried in the family graveyard.
Thank you very much. Please give them a round.
Woo! Yeah.
Back in the early 1900s, Clark University interviewed Miss Delina Brown Calloway, and I want to read an excerpt from her because she is kind of like a living person speaking to us. It says, Delina Brown Calloway is the daughter of Tom Brown and Emma Turner. She states that her grandfather, Charles Brown, was a deacon and founder of Brown Chapel Church in Tolliver County, Georgia. Her maternal grandparents were Hannah Williams and Sam Turner. I think somebody here is related to them. Thank you, Priscilla. Hannah's wife was the midwife. She's probably birthed a lot of your ancestors. Her siblings were Thomas, Lloyd, Romelia, Colin, Lula Mae, Joe, called John, Lucy Laney, Virginia, Maddie, and Herbert. At that time, we didn't have birth certificates. I don't remember how old they were. My mother was real light, and my father was black. So therefore, there were 3 different colors of us. I went to Brown Chapel. My mother and all of them went to Springfield Church. Brown Chapel is still there. It's pretty. The pastor's name when I joined the church was Gerald Barnett. My grandfather was a big deacon. He was the founder of the church. He was an old man that just would walk around and pray and cry. When my daddy went down to his church, we had to ride down in an old Usry. It had a top on it and had 3 seats in there. Took 2 horses to drive it. He was a member of Springfield Church. They met on 4th Sunday. Brown Chapel was every 1st Sunday. That was some hard work on the plantation. I chopped cotton and I helped with the corn, the peanuts, the sweet potatoes. My father grew corn, collards, peas, wheat, practically everything there was to grow on the farm. When the boys were there, we had an 8-horse farm. We had to work. We didn't have any money now, but we always had plenty of food. We put the peanuts upstairs in our old slavery time house, and in the wintertime, we had to share peanuts. By me living on the farm, working with my daddy, I never knew what a depression was. We worked on a farm and never lived on anybody's land but our own. We didn't know anything about no sharecropping. On our farm, we had everything. We used to heel sweet potatoes. We had a big garden. We raised greens all year round. We had peas and potatoes. We worked hard, but we had plenty of food to eat. And we all got 2 dresses every year, in May and August. We had homemade cakes and pies. We go over to another's house to eat. On the 9th day of April, we always went to Crawfordville for Emancipation Proclamation Day. Crawfordville was a big community. It was black and white. The whites would go off to themselves, and we'd be off to ourselves. I never had a birthday party. We didn't have Christmas celebration and all that. Maybe a little speech at Sunday school. Every funeral, everybody was going to heaven. You know how that is. They spread big dinners for funerals. In May and August, everybody bought a basket, and we'd have big dinners at the church. I enjoyed it. We had to walk to church for 5 miles. Thank you. Now we're going to leave a little time for Reverend Angela Harrington Rice, and she's going to take us home.
Terry, that sounds like an invitation to preach. Oh, y'all shouting, clapping hands now, but wait until I want to take up collection. Then y'all gonna get real silent. But thank you. First of all, I would like to just give a round of applause to all of our family members who represented family members.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for giving us a really great impression of our ancestors. And I really want to thank Terry Howard for the work that she continues to do, the passion that she continues to put into it, and the love that she continues to have for our dear old Springfield. I am one of those children who grew up in Springfield when Springfield was still, I would call, the village. Terry and I would do all types of things, such things that kids don't do anymore. Play mud pies, make mud pies, play in the wood, go foraging for grapes, muscadines, scumdines, cut no fear, yelling at us, telling us to get out of her fields, you know, looking for wild fruit. I mean, just a really great time. You know, we would also, we still had a syrup mill. Does anybody know what a syrup mill is? And they would cut the cane, and then, you know, it would be a big deal to be there out at night, late with all of your family members while they're grinding the cane and you'd see it being made into syrup. I mean, it was really special. And being able to harvest the food, to pick the potatoes out of the ground, to preserve pears and peaches. So there's a lot of our life that is being lost. And that whole idea of cousins coming in the summer to be with their grandparents. And I was always jealous because my grandmother had the least of all children. She only had 6. So it wasn't a lot of grandkids coming down, not like the Turners and the Bowmans who had a whole slew of grandchildren who would come down in the summer. So a lot of that is being lost, and what most importantly, I believe, is being lost is community. The way that African people or African American people have excelled has only been through community. We've not been able to do as our counterparts who believe in individualism. They believe that we take for ourselves. There's one professor who says it's because African people never really had to struggle. You know, because, I mean, think about it. If you live in Africa, you don't have to worry about the cold. You don't have to worry, you know, there's fruit that hangs from trees. You know, there was so much, you know. And then if you lived in a cold climate, you had to really forage for stuff, and you had to kind of hide it and keep it to yourself. So it creates a whole different mentality. So one of the things that I hope that can come out of our family reunions is not just us coming together to hear the stories of our ancestors, but continuing to work on developing community that can keep us strong. We have a wonderful legacy, and I've always been proud of it, and I hope that you're proud of it too. So one of the things that I think that might help, and I hope you will join in with me, I want everyone who's seated here and everybody seated on the hill, if you will, I want you to look out at the audience, and I want you to choose a person that you're going to get to know. And I want you to stay in touch with that person, get to know that person, let that person be your Facebook friend. You can send Christmas cards, you can send birthday cards, but I want you to get to know someone so that we can begin to extend this community to people who are outside of our individual families. So I want you to take an opportunity to just look around and connect with that person and exchange information, and then after that you'll have new instructions. So, yeah, right now, one person, right now. New people. Monique. New people.
Hi, I'm a new people.
I'm gonna get with you, cousin. My man. Yes, sir.